And welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is taking out the trash. We can accumulate all kinds of things that have outlived their usefulness, whether they be thoughts or actual material things. And taking out the trash can be very liberating, even though there is no such thing as trash in nature. We're just going to use it as a moniker here, but it should be a fun conversation. Before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together. Vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop, and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, Rosalind. Good morning and welcome. It's great to have you here with us. And welcome to everybody else who's joining us. Wonderful to have you here. And today we're talking about taking out the trash. Things can accumulate, negative thoughts, negative patterns, things that are trash, that are decaying, that are rotting, that are that have just outlived their usefulness. And what does it take to get ourselves to purge this stuff? And metaphorical stuff as well, where we're talking about thoughts and feelings and outmoded perspectives. And we do know that one person's trash is another person's treasure, right? Not always. And let's just have a look at what is the tipping point that allows us to just say, okay, enough is enough. Let's do something about this. And to make the extra effort that is required to maybe confront the overwhelm. Sometimes it can be overwhelming to contend with the clutter provided by excess. So it's interesting. I've often thought of and learned about the minimalist lifestyle, and it's something that personally I've recoiled from, which is interesting. I mean, I love the concept. Theoretically, I love the concept, and what I notice is that I love the collection of beautiful things that I surround myself with. So I wouldn't call those things trash by any means. they might be to somebody else. They're amongst the collection. There are stones and shells and sticks and all kinds of other things from nature. But what is it that finally allows us to overcome the resistance? Maybe it's resistance or the distraction. Maybe to when the distraction becomes so extreme, perhaps, maybe that's when we have to start addressing it. And I wonder, like, what is it when we talk about motivation, and what is it that creates motivation? For many of us, motivation is the vision of what life will be like when all these things are completed. For instance, all these tasks are taken care of. Then maybe it creates a spaciousness. Uh, it's interesting. It's interesting to be thinking about what is when we are looking to create spaciousness of body, mind, and spirit. There's a lot of mental house cleaning that needs to take place also, right? We need to be addressing some mental, emotional, behavioral patterns that identify us or that we identify with. So this was really interesting. Yesterday, I I was working with a client, and this client has had a lifetime and a long lifetime of anxiety, and they are making breakthrough after breakthrough in finding a sense of ease that they've never had in their whole life. Well, for 60 years of their lives. And what was really interesting is that we were able to identify that there is an aspect, a part of themselves that is comfortable. I love this person has a wonderful saying. My favorite miserable. In other words, something that is uncomfortable, but that is, or it may be, it's painful, but it's a known pain. So there's comfort to it because it's familiar. And so what we were able to identify is that there was a part that we were calling the anxiety part that just was reasserting itself over whatever progress we had managed to achieve. So what would happen is that initially there would be a good response to whatever we did, and things would be great for a couple days, and then the old patterns would kick in again. And what we got to was that the old patterns had a certain comfort to them. And without them, it was uncharted territory. So without the anxiety, it was like, well, who am I without anxiety, having been so anxious for so long? And rather than just trying to get rid of things, um, throwing things away, we know that there is no away, by the way. But rather than just trying to get rid of this anxiety, because it really had a lot of power because it kept reasserting itself, what we were able to do was to look at what it was its positive intention and how could we allow it to express its intention in a way that was more positive, that was more in alignment with the actual intention. So the intention was to motivate and um, to preserve certain level of humanity and humility. And the effect was that it was creating all kinds of fear and anxiety, and it wasn't really motivating. So what was awesome was that we got to transform this anxiety, which we were calling it anxiety. We were able to transform it into a project manager, because really what its intention was to make sure that this person got stuff done, and also a sense of humility as part of that. But it was really, really, really interesting because the anxiety embraced the idea of being a project manager, except it was a bit curmudgeonly in that context, because it it wanted to do things the way that it wanted to do things. It didn't necessarily want to switch things up after so long, but it reluctantly joined the party. So it was fun. It was fun and interesting. And when we go back to this idea of taking out the trash, it's kind of like looking at what the excess is, looking at the clutter, looking at the things that are distracting and create a sense of overwhelm or disconnection, and looking at how we can then address those things. Oftentimes, what I notice is in myself that I tend to, and I'm just starting to identify this actually, I tend to go into sort of a state of overwhelm. And then in that state of overwhelm, there's shutdown. And then, sort of from that shutdown, there's dissociation from the environment. And then, as a result of that dissociation, there's a tolerance um, for circumstances that might not be optimal. So, like leaving things unattended to because of this state of overwhelm, and then from the overwhelm there's shutdown. So there's like an obliviousness to the whatever disrupting factors there might be. I'm thinking, I don't know. I'm not a clinician, and I'm not a diagnostician, but I imagine that this is not an uncommon kind of reaction, to, I don't know if it's one of the D's, the ADD, ADHD, OCD. I don't know if it's one of these or if it's something else, but I think it's indicative of certain, like a neurosensitivity. You're so hypersensitized that the only way to cope is to just shut down and then dissociate. So Rosalind says, doing a lot of nothing instead of the new project. Oh yeah, that's a good one. That's something that lots and lots of us do. Rather than taking out the trash or organizing or decluttering, and I'm talking about this physically and metaphorically. We often just sort of wall it off or separate it from ourselves so that we're not as sensitized to it. And then it just becomes more and more overwhelming to address it directly. So, uh, I guess it's making me think of a couple people that I have worked with who have issues around hoarding. And I guess hoarding is a matter of degree. Like, when does it become hoarding? But there's so much stuff that it's so overwhelming that confronting it by oneself is often extremely challenging and difficult. And so I've seen in certain situations just employing a almost like a study buddy, but a buddy system where there's somebody there just to be there. And the intention of having that person there is to have the moral support to just do it, to keep doing it. And whereas by oneself, it is easy to go down rabbit holes and get distracted and go into avoidance and all kinds of things like that. But it's interesting because I've noticed with myself every now and then that I just sort of wake up, I sort of shake myself out of that dissociation, and I look around and it's like, oh, okay, stuff to be done here. That was stuff that I was tolerating. It was, oh, and the thing about this is that there's always that low level existence of that stuff that needs to be addressed, whether it's stuff that we've been avoiding in work or communications or actual stuff that needs addressing. And when we have those moments of clarity, maybe, or awareness, it's a really good time to capitalize on them because they don't necessarily last, again, because of the overwhelm. So the thing that seems to be effective, or a thing that seems to be effective, is to just deal with little corners of things, chunk it down. This is a technique that I've been schooled in, actually. I think it was, I've forgotten whose system it is, but to get everything that you need to do out of your mind and on paper, and then chunk it down. So, for example, if you have a website that you want to put together, rather than having one of the tasks be put together website, break that big task down into the little tasks that are part of it, so that if you have 5 minutes, you can address one of those little tasks. And then it doesn't seem so overwhelming. You can do one thing at a time rather than looking at this big thing that you don't know how to approach. So I think that might be the same thing with taking out the trash, so to speak. I think also that this is where routines can be helpful, is if we create certain routines of, for instance, neatening up on a regular basis, on a daily basis, and disciplining ourselves when, and it is a discipline when something occurs, to address it then. If it's something that's only going to take a couple minutes, for example, like after eating, instead of leaving the dishes in the sink, for example, just washing off the dish. And it's funny because I used to be, and still am sometimes, a leave the dishes in the sink person. And I notice that there's space that's created when I wash the dishes right away, when I address it right away, when I'm able to just make that part of the process. I guess same idea as, in a way, same idea as making your bed. There's a psychological thing about getting out of bed and making your bed before you go and do other stuff. And I have lived many days without my bed made. And I have also lived many days by making my bed. And when I do that, there's something about that ritual, like a completion, and it sets the stage in the room in a very different way. It's interesting. It's interesting, these little nuanced psychological things that make a difference. Like when we get mail, to go through the mail next to a trash can, and to not just let it accumulate, but to take a few minutes when you get that mail and process it. Um, I guess this is similar to managing other kinds of communications. However, there's a very different way, perhaps, to approach that, and so that it doesn't become overwhelming and doing a lot of nothing instead of what needs to be done. Like emails flow in continuously and demand our attention in a very constant way, unless we restrict it. So unless we restrict the amount of time that we, like, not turning off the alerts, for example, because otherwise we get constantly distracted with the nothing that pulls us away from the something that we're trying to do. It's interesting. It's interesting to see, like, what does it take to get to the point where you just have to clean up, for example. You just have to take out the trash. How smelly does it have to get before it gets your attention? Like, how bad does it have to be before you take the action that needs to be taken? Because, too, very easily we can spend all of our time doing a lot of nothing that doesn't move us forward into a sense of spaciousness and expansiveness. So I think we all have different thresholds. And part of that is different capacities to block this stuff out so that it doesn't impact us, or before it finally calls our attention. And I know with folks that uh, have collected immense amounts of things, that a ritual of taking a certain amount of time on a daily basis to go through a box, to go through a pile of stuff, for example, and to set parameters for themselves can be really, really helpful. I'm exploring this because I see in myself even an erratic kind of um, follow through when it comes to having things neat and clean surfaces, and being organized, and also having a flurry of things everywhere. And I've often said, the state of my home is a reflection of my interior state. So I can see that there might be some chaotic stuff going on for me by looking around. And then we can address that. It's interesting how we can sometimes address that from the outside in as well as from the inside out. Like we can address the internal chaos by creating more calm in the external sometimes. And we are fascinating beings, aren't we? There's so many dimensions of our beingness and our way of being, and so many things to manage in life. And I think it's only become more so, where we're each responsible for being our own experts. So simplifying, I was talking about the minimalist lifestyle, um, not just thing wise, but maybe simplifying our lives, our spiritual, emotional, mental lives, simplifying by relieving ourselves of certain obligations, responsibilities, the frenetic drive to do more and more and more. Maybe we can allow ourselves to prioritize and let go of those things that have outlived their usefulness. And maybe that means delegating to other people. Maybe it means giving things away. Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting to notice these patterns and what it is to relieve ourselves of some of these things that are just causing chaos internally or externally, or that are the symptoms of chaos, perhaps. Because when we do that, we do create more space physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And when there's space, and maybe, I think for a lot of folks, when there's space, the inclination is to fill it up, like a goldfish expanding to the size of its bowl, perhaps. Anyway, things to think about: taking out the trash, being able to discern what's trash and what's not. That's a biggie. Anyway, that's it for today. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And as always, it is such a delight to be able to noodle through these thoughts and ideas and experiences together, and come up with new perspectives sometimes, and just new questions others. Anyway, until next time.